Shrewsbury was practically on the Welsh border. Jen knew from studying a map before she'd left, so presumably they were now in Wales. Across the flat green farmland ahead, suddenly and abruptly rose mountains. The Welsh Marches, Jen remembered from somewhere. And beyond them, what? Jen glanced at her watch, willing the time to pass quickly. All had gone according to Aunt Beth's painstaking plans. She thought again of the round dining-room table in Amherst, covered with maps, schedules, an atlas, endless pieces of paper and pencils, the paper filled with Aunt Beth's neat but illegible writing. Times and flight numbers, lists of clothing, emergency information, names and addresses. Most of the paper was now folded and clipped together into the huge new pocketbook, which Jen kept obediently hooked over her arm even while she sat in the train. "For heaven's sake, dear, don't let it out of your hands. You just don't know what may happen, and all your money and documents are in it." Aunt Beth had looked so worried in the Logan Airport waiting room that Jen almost decided not to go at the last minute, convinced by her aunt that the trip was impossible. But she had her father's letter in her pocket, the one that told her how much he was looking forward to seeing her. And Uncle Ted grinned reassuringly at her and said, "Send us a postcard when you arrive." "Oh, I will," Jen promised. "A letter." They were among the mountains now, the train following a valley between the great stone-ribbed humps, patched with dead rust-colored bracken. Jen had grown up among the hills of western Massachusetts, the Holyoke Range along the Connecticut River, and she loved them. But they had never given her the strange feeling these did. These seemed immensely ancient and wild. Without knowing their history, she knew they had one. Welsh Pool was the first of a string of little stations they stopped at. A collection of low grey stone houses and narrow streets. Jen couldn't begin to pronounce most of the names of the towns. Not for the first time, she wondered what Borth would look like. It was a tiny dot on the map beside the sea, with nothing to make it different from hundreds of other tiny dots. She wondered if it were pretty and had gardens, or if it were a fishing village with a harbour and boats. Her father's letters had told her very little, really. Becky's notes were mostly concerned with school and the people she met, and Peter never wrote at all. Aunt Beth had remarked on that, and Jen could tell from her tone of voice that she still disapproved strongly of what her brother, Jen's father, David, had done. Only 5 months after his wife's death, he had accepted a teaching position at the University of Wales in Aberystwyth, and less than 4 months after that, he and his 2 youngest children had gone to live in Wales. Nothing Beth could say to him would change his mind. He was grimly determined to get away from Amherst, at least for a while, to fill his mind with something besides the automobile accident. When Aunt Beth had realized it was pointless to argue with him over going, she had begun on his responsibility to his children instead. And David had finally relented. Jen could still see his set white face as he told her that she was to stay in Amherst with Aunt Beth and Uncle Ted and continue high school. She had protested, but only half-heartedly. Secretly she was relieved not to be leaving the town and school and friends she had known all her life. The horror of losing her mother was only compounded by the idea of leaving all that was safe and familiar, and she didn't understand why David felt he had to. For Peter, 12, and Becky, 10, there was never any choice. Their father stubbornly refused to leave them behind. Jen was only 2 years from college, and college was very important to David. Nothing must jeopardize her education. But a year in Welsh schools wouldn't harm the other 2 at all. It would, on the contrary, be a good experience. So Jen had helped sort and pack and store things in the attic of their Amherst house,